What's the difference between earning $100,000 as an employee and $100,000 as an entrepreneur?
Welcome back to the Active Life Podcast. Today, we're answering that question. I've spent a lot of time thinking about this lately. I've had good conversations with the team over at the flagship because one of the things that we talk about and have talked about in the past is what it looks like to earn $100,000 as an ALP. Mm-hmm. And that's as an entrepreneur, as a business owner. And I believe that there are some misconceptions there. Because what we're not thinking about is all of the costs and expenses occurred as an entrepreneur.
There are pros and cons to being an entrepreneur and an employee. Mm-hmm. And I think that anyone who wants to work in any industry should evaluate what those pros and cons are if they're going to decide, well, what's actually best for them.
What are some of the pros of being an entrepreneur?
Pros of being I'm going to list all for both, if that's okay.
Yep.
Pros of being an entrepreneur: autonomy. You do what you want, when you want, how you want it done. Pro number 2, your schedule is up to you to decide. Pro number 3, you decide what your earning potential is. You decide what you charge. You decide how and when you charge it. You work as much or as little as you want. The cons to being an entrepreneur is that the floor is much lower than the floor to an employee. You keep what you produce, period. This is not you plug in and you get a paycheck no matter how you do your job. You get paid for what you produce. If you don't produce, you don't get paid. You can make $0, as many entrepreneurs will tell you, for a long time. Con number 2, you have to spend all of the time and the energy to put the business in place, the infrastructure of it, the systems, decide how it's going to work, who the customers are, where they're going to come from, and then it's on you to get them. The cons to being an employee are that your schedule, your pay, and who you work with and how it's done are determined by the employer. The second con is that your earning potential is established by the employer. The pros to being an employee are that you have to spend 0 time and energy building any of the business. You step into an infrastructure that has systems in place that someone else put, that has customers that someone else is paying to attract and putting in front of you. The last pro is that you have a predictable paycheck. If you do your job in the parameters that are given to you, with a little bit of a margin for you having a good day and the bad days, you're going to get paid.
Mm-hmm. I would say another pro as being an employee is that all of the expenses occurred by the entrepreneur are not incurred by the employee.
Yeah, so the last one's a huge one, actually. Thank you for pointing that out. You don't have to pay for any of the business things to be there.
Yeah.
There are fewer expenses from a business perspective. You just go to work.
Yeah. So how I believe this conversation is going to be helpful is to make it a data-driven conversation rather than an opinion-based conversation.
Okay. Perfect.
So we've got some numbers here, and I want to walk through these. And really what it is to help everybody set this frame really well is what are the expenses associated with being an employee at Active Life? We'll use the flagship as our model for that. And then what are the expenses as an entrepreneur? Mm-hmm. So to start off, as an employee at Active Life, there are really 2 expenses that the employees are responsible for. It's their personal tax liability and it's their shoes. Everything else is purchased by the company. So
what are examples of things that are purchased by the company?
The apparel, rent for the facility, the softwares and systems, the education, the mentorship, insurance, the cost of acquisition. Those are examples of the things that the business incurs. So if we're thinking about, we're going to use $100,000 as our number for the conversation today. As an employee, the 2 biggest expenses, the number 1 is going to be your personal tax burden, and you're going to be somewhere between 27 and 30%. Mm-hmm. You also pay for your shoes. Much smaller number.
Not $27,000 to $30,000.
No.
Yeah.
You're probably spending a couple $100 in a year
Yeah.
on shoes. So as an employee, you could expect to take home somewhere between $73,000 and $70,000 in a year.
That's after everything.
After everything. That's your take home. That's what you can see deposited into your bank account after the year. That's your net, not your gross. Sounds good. So let's walk through what might be different as an entrepreneur. So the numbers, apparel, we'll shoot on the low end for all of these numbers. Apparel, we're going to assume that you might spend $500 in a year on your apparel. Your rent on average, and this is going to be variable for everybody, but I think a reasonable number here to use is $1,000 a month.
I agree from what I've seen.
You're renting space. You're renting space in a facility, or maybe you have your own facility.
Your own studio, something like that.
Yep. So you can expect $12,000 in a year as the number for rent. The software and the systems that you might be utilizing. So your programming software. Let's say you're using something like a True Coach. On the low end, you're probably spending $50 a month. Any sort of scheduling software you have, if you have an Acuity or a Calendly, $10. But all of these things continue to stack up. If you have any sort of CRM, that's going to be even more expensive, right? Let's say maybe you're using a Go High Level or some sort of, what's the other one that they do email marketing? MailChimp. You're using systems like that. So we'll shoot on the low end. Again, you're spending $750 in a year.
Okay.
On your systems and software. One of the bigger expenses is going to be your education, your mentorship, your continuing education or your mentorship. And we'll say $500 a month is what you're going to spend.
I would say that that's at the low end for anyone who's worth their salt.
Yes, I agree. So again, we're using the low end numbers to paint the picture here. $6,000 in a year go into your education and your mentorship. I agree with the low end piece. I remember, the first 4 years of owning my businesses, I spent $40,000, maybe more, on education, mentorship. I worked with everybody, started with Barbell Business back in the day. That turned into Gym Right. That went to Two Brain. That went to Active Life. Right? And every one of those was an incremental jump in systems, processes, and personal mentorship. So this is just your business mentor. This isn't even your personal mentorship that you might be engaged in. So you got $6,000.
When you say personal mentorship, you mean things like any personal coaching, therapy, anything that's just improving you as a person outside of business.
Yeah. $6,000 a year will be the number that we'll place on the education and mentorship. Finally, you're going to have insurance. So, you have a $3 million liability policy. It costs you like $14 a month.
Yeah.
So $150 a year. Insurance is pretty cheap.
Yep.
For personal trainers. Aside from those, you're going to then have a cost of acquisition. So if you're spending $0 on acquisition, you're not using any sort of paid you're not going out to the farmer's market. You're not doing anything. You have no cost of acquisition. You're just all referral based. You can zero out this number. You don't have any cost. We put together 2 incremental steps. So you could be spending $6,000 in a year on acquisition, or you could be spending $12,000 a year. You're spending $500 a month or $1,000 a month is your total cost of acquisition. So based on those 3 scenarios, all expenses taken into account, you're going to be somewhere between, your net is going to be somewhere between, this is before tax, you're going to be somewhere between $80,000 and $68,000. That's the amount of money that you are going to be taxed on. It's all of your income minus your expenses. That's what you end up paying tax on.
So to be clear, the entrepreneur here is paying for expenses, and then they are going to pay their tax.
Yes. Yes. In those scenarios, you're going to be somewhere between a $24,000 to $25,000 tax liability and a $20,000 tax liability. Now that's going to be your personal, and you're also your self-employment. Or if you have a business like an LLC, that's the same thing included. You're going to have a business tax associated with that. We're not going to include the cost of like filing, starting an LLC.
It's $100.
Yeah. We'll just leave that one out.
So in New York State, it's $100 a year to file your taxes.
Great.
For an LLC like that. Yep.
Great. So working through this math now, what we're able to say is, okay, what's going to be the take home for the entrepreneur in this scenario? Again, at $100,000. If you're spending $0 on acquisition, you have all of your expenses and your tax, you're going to take home 55.9. So we'll call it $56,000 a year is going to be your take home as an entrepreneur. You're spending $6K, you're going to take home $52,000 a year. If you're spending $12K, you're going to take home $48,000.
To be clear, this is for what you're spending on any advertising.
Yes.
So one more time, if you're spending $0 on advertising, you'll take home how much?
$56,000.
Spend $6,000 a year on advertising.
$52,000.
And if you spend $12,000 a year on advertising,
$48,000.
Got it.
So your take home is obviously impacted by the amount of money you're spending on advertising. Mm-hmm. Now, that cost of acquisition, when you have a really good system, you have a good offer, you have a good sales funnel, all of those things, what it does is it creates a potential future for a much higher ceiling
of income.
Yep. At the point in time when you start to scale up and you might become a business owner that has employees, these numbers are going to change. Mm-hmm. We're going to just assume here,
all numbers go up.
Yes. Everything goes up. I remember 2021. I had the two facilities in the Midwest. So I had Fortitude Strength and I had CrossFit Angola. And between the two businesses, we made $500,000. I made $500,000 in that year.
I think someone listening to that might go, that sounds great.
Yeah. My take home was 60.
Yeah.
I took home, and I might be like fluffing the numbers a little bit on what I actually took home.
Meaning it was a little closer to 57.
Or 50.
Yeah.
Now, I had 4 employees at the time who were bringing home $50,000 in the year, in the median income of 48 and 44.
And then $300,000 of remaining expenses across the two facilities.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. All of the things. So we might hear that number, right? And it's a fun number to put out there. Like, I made $500,000 in 2021. And often that's what happens when we think about earning potential is we see, and we talk about this, right? The ALPs who are making $100,000, that's their gross. That's what they are as a business bringing in. It's not factoring in all of the expenses incurred by that.
Business and personal, because they have to pay themselves for their personal expenses.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's all money out.
Right. Like your $60,000 that you made, you didn't keep $60,000. You took it home, and then you spent it on home things.
Mm-hmm. Well, that was $60,000, not including my personal tax liability. That was what I grossed out of the business, not including my 20 to 30%.
Yeah. So there's this glorification of the entrepreneur in terms of the sky's the limit, but employees often fail to consider that they're actually taking home more, all of the things, an income being equal. Mm-hmm. So is the fundamental thing that a person needs to evaluate come down to, is the autonomy and the higher ceiling worth everything I have to do to put that opportunity in place? Is that what this comes down to? Yes,
it's a piece of that. It's establishing, in that vein, what it is establishing what are the risks here? Mm-hmm. What are the potential rewards here? And then making the decision as an entrepreneur that you are most inspired by incurring the risk for the potential of the reward.
So is the reward worth the risk involved?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think about a lot of people that I know who are much happier as employees because they don't want to face the risk and the uncertainty and the energy of let's find out if I could. Mm-hmm. And that's okay. Mm-hmm. I just think that it's healthy for people to be able to evaluate there are problems everywhere. What problems do you want to have?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think in our society now, and even over the last 10 years, this whole entrepreneurial journey has been so glorified.
The 18-year-olds using ChatGPT to create businesses in 5 minutes.
Here's how I make $10,000 a month using ChatGPT. Yeah. I think there's an overglorification of that. And I think people see that. They do a little bit of napkin math. It's very similar to the me at 26, 27, 25, starting my first CrossFit gym and being like, okay, if I have 100 clients and I'm charging them $100 a month, That's going to earn, what is that? 100 times 10,000?
Yeah.
So that's going to get me $120,000 in a year.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
So we do a bunch of napkin math. We're like, okay, this is all that I need to do to be able to do this.
Right,
Let's go.
I think that most people fail to realize that deciding to become an entrepreneur for the most part is not sexy. Most of it is not fun. Most of it is you actually have, here's how I visualize this. The entrepreneur and the employee that are doing the same work to bring in $100,000 a year, it's the exact same life from a work standpoint. But then the entrepreneur adds a negative and a positive that the employee does not ever face. So the employee doesn't get the negative that the entrepreneur deals with, but the employee doesn't get the positive that the entrepreneur deals with. So all the work being the same, a person has to decide, is the risk and the extra time, money, and energy that I'm going to incur as this negative worth the positive that I otherwise won't get to enjoy?
Mm-hmm.
And if you're just happy with your work and what that provides you, then there isn't a reason to consider becoming an entrepreneur.
Yeah. And this is a purely financial conversation. We're not even talking about the other benefits of being an employee, being on a team, like
sure,
having
those are other pros that I didn't even consider. I appreciate you bringing that up. Yeah.
Other people, like one of the reasons that I made the decision to start working for Active Life was I wanted to be on a team again.
I know a lot of entrepreneurs that describe feeling lonely.
They feel like they're on an island.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So to surmise this really well, look, you can make $100,000 as an employee or as an entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
What you are going to take home is a potential gap between those two of somewhere between $25,000 and $20,000.
The employee taking home more.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
The employee in this scenario is going to take home $73,000 to $70,000. We'll call it $70,000.
Mm-hmm.
So the employee takes home $70,000. The entrepreneur takes home 55
mm-hmm.
to 50.
So if you wanted to take home $70,000 as a person, and you're deciding whether you want to do that as an employee or an entrepreneur, you have to choose between, do I want to do it as an employee on these terms, and this is how I bring home $70,000, doing $100,000 worth of work, or do I want to do what's probably about $130,000 worth of work, $140,000 worth of work as an entrepreneur, so I can take home $70,000.
Yeah.
That's what that comes down to.
Yep.
Okay. What else do you think is important to share with respect to people evaluating these differences?
Just go through the time of sitting down and doing this math. Make the data-driven decision.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing that we do with our clients.
What are some of the data points you think people should be weighing in for themselves just so they can take home items to do good math on?
Well, all of the expenses that we listed,
mm-hmm.
right? You have a reasonable idea of what your expenses are.
So if you're going to be an entrepreneur, what are the expenses you're going to incur to run a business like this?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
If the expenses being number one, the time freedom, the flexibility, like those things might be disproportionate to you. Like the value of those things, being able to make your own schedule, being able to decide exactly the type of client that you want to work with. So those are the less data driven and more opinion based things that we can look at. The final one being what we had already talked about, the value for you of being on your own or being on a team. Do you want a higher potential ceiling and a lower potential floor? That's the third thing.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you breaking that down.
You're welcome.
Good work, Cody.
See you out there.
I hope you enjoyed that episode of the Active Life podcast. If you did, please head to wherever you listen and leave us that 5-star rating. It really does go a long way. 5 stars goes a long way. Please leave them. If you're interested in working with us as a coach, remember, we help coaches from around the world build fulfilling careers, working with clients they're inspired to help so they never have to worry about being able to pay your bills again. No one's ever going to ask you if you are going to get a real job when you work with Active Life. All you have to do, head into the show notes, click the link that you find there, download our curriculum. That will give you a feel for what it is going to take for you to be successful. A team member of ours will reach out to you to find out if it's a fit for us to work together. Till the next show, turn pro.